Welcome to the Bloodborne Pathogens training. Most communities, large and small, have first responders. People are designated and trained to give first aid when someone is ill or injured. While most people would immediately respond to help an injured coworker, without training there's a good chance you'd do more harm than good. And if blood is present, it is possible you'd put yourself at serious risk of disease or death from bloodborne pathogens. This training is designed to help you keep yourself and those around you safe from exposure to bloodborne pathogens. Specifically, it covers the basics of bloodborne pathogens, how to protect yourself, and what to do in the event of an exposure, including the documentation process. After completing this training, you will be able to explain what bloodborne pathogens are and how they are spread, describe what measures can be taken to help protect against exposure to harmful bloodborne pathogens, discuss how to respond to emergencies involving bloodborne pathogens, recognize what to do in the event you are exposed to another person's blood or other potential infectious material, also known as OPIM. Bloodborne pathogens are bacteria, viruses, and other pathogenic organisms that are too small to be seen and can only be detected by sophisticated medical tests. These pathogens live in blood and certain other body fluids and can cause serious disease like hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HIV, AIDS, malaria, Ebola, diseases that can make you extremely sick or even cause death. Exposure to bloodborne pathogens can happen anywhere, anytime, to anyone. Tens of thousands of new cases are reported each year in the United States, many of them after exposure in the workplace. Anytime you come in contact with another person's blood, or what OSHA calls OPIM, other potential infectious materials, you are at risk of becoming infected. OPIM includes the bodily fluids that have come to be associated with transmitting disease. This is any fluid that originates from your body. Even bodily fluids like saliva, vomit, and urine are regulated as OPIM if there has visible blood contamination within it. These pathogens can enter your system when an infected person's blood, or OPIM, comes in contact with your eyes, mouth, nasal membranes, or non-intact skin, including pierced skin or open wounds. Some common ways that infection might happen in a workplace situation include aiding a bleeding coworker, cleaning up blood after an accident, cleaning up tools and equipment following an accident, or handling objects that have been contaminated. Anyone can be a bloodborne pathogens carrier, and you wouldn't know it. They might not even know it because there's no way of knowing you've been infected until you start feeling symptoms or undergo appropriate lab tests. In the U.S., an estimated 800,000 to 1.4 million people have chronic hepatitis B. Since there's no way of recognizing if someone is infected by the way they look or behave, you have no way of knowing if any of them are fellow employees at your workplace. That's why it's so important to be aware of bloodborne pathogens and take necessary precautions to prevent contact with any blood or OPIMs. Because you don't know who in your workplace may or may not be a host to a bloodborne pathogen, you should treat all blood and OPIMs as if they were infectious. This is known as universal precautions. Whether you have occupational exposure or not, universal precautions require you to always assume someone's infectious and protect yourself accordingly. Employers are not required to offer the hepatitis B vaccine to workers who perform Good Samaritan acts. In other words, if you help someone, but it isn't part of your job duties, and you are exposed, your employer does not have to offer you the vaccine. However, OSHA strongly recommends all exposed employees to get vaccinated within 24 hours of an incident. If you are not at work and you are exposed to someone else's blood, or OPIMs, please go see a local doctor or your local clinic and get a vaccination as soon as possible. Work practice controls are procedures that are designed to help protect you from contacting blood or OPIMs. Common workplace examples include washing your hands thoroughly with soap and water, routinely disinfecting work surfaces, restricting things like eating, drinking, smoking, applying cosmetics, and handling contact lenses in areas where a reasonable likelihood of exposure exists. OSHA requires all workplaces shall be kept clean and orderly and in a sanitary condition. Keeping work areas, stairways, aisles, and walkways clean and free of clutter, and cleaning up any spills right away to help prevent slips and trip hazards. This will help avoid hand, feet, and head injuries that produce large amounts of blood from relatively small lacerations. Protect yourself from accidental contact with contaminated items by being aware of the symbols and colors used to represent biohazard materials. Biohazard warning labels are fluorescent orange or orange, red, and at minimum include the biohazard symbol and the word biohazard in a contrasting color. Note, OSHA regulations indicate that the biohazard symbol is not required where red bags or containers are used. Biohazard warning signs or tags are used to identify equipment or areas that are contaminated with blood or OPIM and are still in need of cleaning or disinfecting. For your protection, be sure you read and follow the instructions on any biohazard warning sign or tag found in your work area. Because exposure to bloodborne pathogens could happen at any time to anyone, the easiest way to protect yourself is to keep your distance from biohazard materials whenever practical, especially if you are not a designated and trained responder or cleanup person. And as always, consult your supervisor for more information on our company's policies. If you injure yourself while on the job, call for help and request first aid as soon as possible. If there is blood or OPIM present, do what you can to contain it to keep any responders from becoming exposed. Then, follow our company's policy to complete any additional post-accident requirements, such as reports. It's human nature to want to help when you see someone else in distress, but when it comes to blood or OPIMs in the workplace, your first priority, if you are not a designated and trained responder, is to call for help. Be sure you know where phones are located and what numbers to call in the event of an emergency. Disposable gloves are the most commonly used protective item for obvious reasons. Your hands are the most likely part of your body to come in contact with another person's blood or bodily fluids. Any break in your skin or on your hand, a paper cut, a scratch, or even a hangnail can offer a route to bloodborne pathogen infection. Inspect each disposable glove before putting them on. Extend them to cover your wrist. If you're wearing long sleeves, it's a good idea to stretch the gloves over the top of your sleeves for added protection. Be sure to remove disposable gloves as soon as possible after they are contaminated, or if they become torn or punctured. And when you do, use caution. Peel off the first glove and hold it in your still gloved hand. Then, with your uncovered fingers, peel off the remaining glove from the inside, being careful not to touch the glove's exterior. Then always wash your hands immediately after removing gloves, or use antiseptic cleaner and wash with soap and water at the first opportunity. Bloodborne pathogens and OPIMs can remain infectious for up to 7 days. So if it is not cleaned up using EPA-approved disinfectant and techniques, contaminants may still be present. That's why it's so important that any blood or OPIM be properly cleaned up by a designated person as soon as possible. When cleaning up after an incident, never pick up blood-contaminated, broken glass, metal shavings, or other sharp items by hand. Even if you're using PPE, use tongs or a plastic scoop to pick up instead, and dispose of it in a labeled puncture-resistant sharps container. When disposing of contaminated waste, other than sharps, wear adequate PPE and place all contaminated items in red leak-proof bags, or bags and receptacles marked prominently with the biohazard label. If you are designated to clean up liquid blood or OPIMs, don't mop it up, as you may only spread around by splashing. It's safer to use an absorbent. Absorbents in a small disposable scraper and dustpan are often included in a commercially available body fluid kit, which we have at all 3 facilities. It's the Bloodborne Pathogens kit. After the liquid is absorbed, Carefully scrape the material into a dustpan before disposing of it in a biohazard bag or receptacle. Then, decontaminate the area with proper disinfectant. In addition to the EPA-approved disinfectants, OSHA says you can also use 1 to 10 parts diluted bleach solution to decontaminate an area after the initial cleanup of spill of blood or OPIMs. You must also properly dispose of or decontaminate any tools that may have been involved with or used to clean up in the incident. Please do not throw away anyone's tools. If disposal is not an option, and you must disinfect equipment used during cleanup that has been exposed to blood or OPIMs, do so with an EPA-approved disinfectant in a sink that's dedicated for industrial use. Do not use a bathroom, break room, or kitchen sink where employees are likely to wash their hands or clean dishes or food items. Even when you take protective measures and follow all company policies, an exposure incident can occur. Blood-stained clothes, shoes, or other fabrics should be handled as little as possible using PPE. If your clothing is exposed to spatter from someone else's blood or OPIMs, remove the items immediately and dispose of it in a biohazard bag or receptacle. Don't be tempted to wash or rinse contaminated clothes yourself, and don't take it home to wash. Doing so puts your family at risk. Minimize your exposure by immediately flooding the exposed area, most likely your hands, with water, and then thoroughly wash the affected skin with soap and water. Flush any splashes to your nose and mouth with water, and flood your eyes with water or saline if they were exposed to blood or OPIMs. It's very important you report the incident to your supervisor, so a record of the exposure can be documented. A medical evaluation can be made available to you if required, and we can look for ways to prevent similar incidents from happening again. Be sure to seek medical attention as soon as possible after a qualifying incident. Following the report of an exposure incident with an employee with occupational exposure, your employer must make confidential medical evaluations and follow-up available at no cost. Your blood will be tested with your consent, and the source individual's blood will be tested if feasible. This treatment may also include the hepatitis B vaccination if you have not already received it. OSHA requires your employer to maintain a comprehensive exposure control plan and make it accessible to all employees. The plan explains which job and/or task within your facility are considered to have an occupational exposure and how your employer will protect you from exposures to bloodborne pathogens. You'll also find details about the methods of reporting an exposure, the required use of PPE, and all the control measures specific to your workplace. So ask your supervisor for more information that our company will provide to protect you from bloodborne pathogens. This training was designed to help you keep yourself and those around you safe from exposure to bloodborne pathogens. Specifically, it covers the basics of bloodborne pathogens, how to protect yourself, and what to do in the event of an exposure, including the documentation process. You should now be able to explain what bloodborne pathogens are and how they are spread, describe what measures can be taken to help protect against exposure to harmful bloodborne pathogens, discuss how to respond to emergencies involving bloodborne pathogens, recognize what to do in the event you are exposed to another person's blood or OPIMs. Thank you for your time. This concludes your OSHA-mandated Bloodborne Pathogens annual training. Stay safe and stay smart.